I think there's a big fundamental flaw with how people think about manifesting, and I'll jump straight into it. Honestly, it's this notion that you've got to create something out of nothing, that somehow with having the absence of the very thing that you're trying to create, you've then got to create that very thing. It's like trying to create some kind of chicken dish without chicken, or it's like trying to create bread, a regular sourdough loaf, without wheat. How do you do that? And I think that's where people start to lean into the mysticism of manifesting and the spiritual side of it and start thinking about, I've just got to say the thing that I want and draw it into my life. But I've worked with some of the top people in those fields, particularly when it comes to manifesting. And do you know what they all say? They say the same thing that I thought when I first discovered what manifesting was back in, I think it was like early 2000s or mid 2000s. And it was this notion of like, what they shared with me was ultimately that you can't create something out of nothing. You're not trying to draw something that doesn't exist into existence. The best thing to do, the most effective way to manifest, is to create from what you've already got. And this goes back to this concept of, well, it's actually a universal principle that comes from physics and chemistry, which is this notion of energy can't be created or destroyed, only transformed, which is really fascinating when we take that parallel from physics and chemistry and bring that into our everyday lives. What if nothing was ever missing? What if the very thing that we're trying to create already exists in our lives, but in a different form? And we're just not appreciating that form. That's the question for me. That's the intrigue that really opened a door for me when it came to creating a life that I want to create for myself. Again, there are layers of mysticism that exist in life. There are things that we cannot explain because we don't understand them, because they're beyond our current understanding. And I think that will be the case for a really long time. Some people try to explain it. Some people try to be reductionist about it. They try to like just reduce it down to its core components. And I can be like that at times. But I think the challenge with that is that they're coming up with explanations for something that they truly don't have an explanation for. It's okay for us to say we don't know. What I've found though is that there's been a little bit of a repeatable pattern that I've been able to lean on that's worked effectively. And honestly, it just comes down to this really simple concept. Nothing's ever created or destroyed, it just changes form. So what does that mean when it comes to this world of manifesting or trying to create some kind of situation in our lives that doesn't currently exist? What it ultimately comes down to is this notion that the thing that you're trying to create isn't missing. It exists in your life, just not in a way that you're appreciating. And that's the thread we want to pull on. The analogy I like to use is if you think about a child and their parents come along with a gift and give them a present and they tear it open, they rip this thing open and then they say, oh, I don't want that. That's not what I want. I want the toy that Johnny has, or I want the toy that Sammy has. Like, that's better. I don't want this. And they're expressing some degree of ingratitude. They're not grateful for what they've got. What do the parents want to do in those situations? All they want to do is take the gift away. Okay, well, if you don't want it and you're being ungrateful for it, I'm more than happy to take that right away from you. Okay, and then what happens? That child becomes frustrated and they've got less than what they've got, and they start throwing a tantrum and they're upset that they've had this toy that they were ungrateful for taken away from them. And so what do we continue to do? Take more and more away from them until eventually they're left with one little wooden block and they've got to use their imagination to think that that's a train because that's what they've been left with. I found that to be the experience of my life. That when I'm ungrateful for the things that I've got in my life, the people, the relationships, the outcomes, the achievements I managed to achieve, however big or small they are, when I'm ungrateful for those things, I don't tend to draw more into my life. In fact, I tend to repel things away because no one's drawn to somebody that's ungrateful. So if I notice that things are slowing down, things aren't moving in the direction I want, I'm struggling to create the things that I want in my life, the first thing I do is sit down and look at what am I ungrateful for in my life. And in those instances, I usually find that the list is longer than I want it to be. Is that the problem? No, the problem is that I'm not grateful for those things. It's not that I've got those things in my life that I'm ungrateful for. That's not the problem. It's that I'm being ungrateful for what I do have. So I sit down and I just do a brain dump. What am I grateful for? Grateful for this relationship, for my daughter, for my wife. They still want to be in my lives. They still want me around. I'm grateful for my mobility. When I wake up in the morning, I can get my feet out of bed and stand up on my own without any assistance. If you know anybody that's struggled with mobility, especially as they age or with some kind of condition, you understand how much that is to be appreciated. My assistant makes fun of me because I have 2 eggs and porridge for breakfast every day. I've been doing that for a long time now. And she's like, why are you eating prison food? And I'm like, well, the prison food, well, what you're describing as prison food, actually tastes amazing as a free person. Because I'm sure porridge in prison doesn't taste the same as porridge to a free man or a free person. Now, granted, porridge straight can be taste a little bit bland. I don't have it bland. I have it with fruit. I have it with cinnamon. I have it with some maple syrup as well. It's not terrible. Like, I actually do enjoy my breakfast. I'm not torturing myself. But I think we take for granted that, like, I get to stand in my own kitchen, turn on the stove, and make fresh porridge each morning with fresh berries and maple syrup that's from Canada. Like, what world am I living in? How incredible is that? But it's so easy to take those things for granted. And I'm guilty of having taken those things for granted too, when I'm having days where they're particularly challenging and I know I'm about to step into challenge when I wake up. I'm not thinking about how grateful I am that I've got Canadian maple syrup in my kitchen and that I get to have porridge as a free person. I'm focused on the challenge that I'm about to face, and it draws me out of the appreciation that I could have for my porridge. So I actually like having porridge as a grounding force, because when I do focus on it, it brings me right back to basics. I've got my health. I'm not in hospital. That's a huge win. Whenever I get sick, if I get a flu or a cold, which has been happening more often lately because I have a 3-year-old, she's very generous with what she brings back from daycare. My metric for being sick is, can I keep myself out of hospital? If I manage to get through an illness and not have to go to hospital, that's a huge win, because I know people who have to go to hospital even when they're not sick, when they don't have a cold or flu, or if somebody does get a cold and they're immunocompromised in some way, they're pretty much guaranteed to be visiting a hospital or hooking themselves up with IV bags at home because they've got a whole protocol. Now, that's something to be grateful for, that we've got access to medicine, that we've got access to modern medicine and tools that we can have in our own home, that we're not still doing bloodletting like they did a few hundred years ago for a really long time, thinking that that was helping somebody. That's what they used to do. I'm not joking. You can look it up. They used to, whenever somebody was wrestling with some kind of condition, the standard go-to was to let blood out. They'd cut part of the body, drain blood out of the body, thinking that if they just drained the contaminated blood, the person would feel better. And it was a genuine form of medicine until they worked out it was actually inefficient and didn't do anything other than dehydrate and put the body under a lot of pressure when it was already struggling. So when I look at modern medicine and what I have accessible to me, antibiotics, if I get an ear infection or if I get a sinus infection, antibiotics will knock it out easily. I don't have to try and manufacture them. There's so many different things for us to be grateful for. And I'm not talking about positive thinking. I'm talking about a genuine sense of appreciation. Like, what is the world that we live in that we've come to completely numb ourselves to just how much privilege we have? And I'm talking about for those of us living in modern, well-developed first world countries and cities. I understand that there are parts of the world that are struggling, and I can understand why they would struggle to find gratitude in their situations. But for people like you and I, we're in such a wonderful situation, and it's so easy for us to forget it. And that's because of hedonic adaptation. It's when we adjust to a new level of pleasure, the things that feel novel and amazing and incredible to us. If you expose yourself to that enough, eventually you'll adapt to it, and that will become your new norm. In fact, you've probably experienced that over the course of your life professionally. If you've earned more money each year, each time that you earn more money, you get a pay bump or your business draws in more money. Initially, it might feel amazing, but then eventually that becomes your new norm. It wasn't that long ago. Laptops or notebooks were costing about 2,000, maybe 2,500 Australian dollars here. I know I'm talking about MacBook Pros. Now, they're starting at 3,500, but to get something of similar power, we're talking about $4,000. Now, back when laptops were $2,500, a $4,000 or $4,500 laptop would seem outrageous. But now that's like the midpoint. And we're just like, yep, okay, that's pretty standard. Having access to artificial intelligence, we're still adjusting to it. We're still unsure of where it's going to go, what it's capable of, and new capabilities keep getting unlocked. But eventually we will get to a point where we'll just be looking at that as like, yeah, that's pretty standard. Like, who doesn't have AI? And according to some of the people that are very bullish on AI, particularly the robotic side, they're pretty confident that we're all going to live like, not everyone's seen this movie. It's kind of old now, but there's a movie with Robin Williams called Centenary Man or Bicentenary Man. And he's an AI robot that lives in people's homes. And so it's a standard feature. It was prominent in luxury homes in this particular movie and people that were high income earners. But the way it's being positioned is that it won't be. It'll be accessible to middle income earners. I don't know about low income earners. But it's going to become a standard. And eventually we're all just going to be looking at like, what are you doing? Like, why don't you have a robot? Why are you still doing your own laundry? Now, I don't know how I feel about that future. I don't know how far away that future is. I can't say that's necessarily the future that I actually want. I'm not saying I don't want it, but I'm not saying I want it. I'm just here along for the ride with everybody else, just finding out what happens as it unfolds. I'm not optimistic. I'm not pessimistic about it. I'm just quite neutral. But we adjust. It wasn't that long ago I was having to log in and make sure no one was using the phone, the home phone, the landline phone at home, so I could log into the internet, check email and jump onto MSN chat. And I'd have to wait about 90 seconds with the dial-up tone. It was wild. It wasn't that long ago. And we just adjust. And now if there's no internet connection, we have a meltdown. So what am I saying in all of this? I know I'm using a multitude of examples, but I want to show you just how much we then look at our lives and we're saying, I want to go and create that for myself. But you want to go and create that and you're not appreciating this, what you have here. If you want to look at this through the eyes of the universe or God or spirit or nature, whatever word you want to use, or consciousness, if it was a parent and you were a child and you're saying, I want this, I want that thing out there, but I'm ungrateful for what I have here. Why would the parent give it to you? Why would it provide that to you if you're ungrateful for what you've got? So my preference is if there's something I'm working towards, I want to unlock a deep sense of gratitude for what I do have before I even go working towards creating that. So if I'm trying to unlock a new level of revenue in my business, I want to be appreciative of the revenue that I've been able to generate, the accumulative revenue over the years. All the people that have been willing to do business with me, all the people that have been willing to ask for my help and trust me to guide them through it and pay finances in exchange for my help and my services. So having gratitude for all the people that have been willing to come into my life means that I'm more likely to feel gratitude and grateful for the people that are going to come in that I haven't met yet. And it also helps me unlock a sense of gratitude for what could be. The more gratitude I find I express for the very things that I've got in my life, however little they happen to be at various times, I find things just start to unfold with a greater sense of ease. Don't get me wrong, there's no absence of challenge in my life. There's a plethora of challenge I have to face, week by week. I'm not exempt from the rule of dealing with difficulty, but at least if I keep orienting my thinking and my focus towards feeling a sense of gratitude for whatever it is that I do have, that firstly reduces my suffering, but I genuinely believe that it opens me up to opportunities that most people would call manifesting in ways that I couldn't have dreamed of. And things that I don't even know how they came into my life. In some instances, I can see the causal chain of how this thing over here that I did however long ago ultimately led to this situation over here and this particular opportunity that's presenting itself today. There's usually a causal chain that I can see in like 50% of the cases. But the other 50% of the cases, I've got no idea. And sometimes I'll ask people, they don't even know how they found me, but they found me and they're grateful that they did. I can't explain that other than that's something bigger than me. So my orientation is towards finding gratitude for what is unfolding, for what I do have. And I'll do it in the smallest ways, in the smallest moments. For example, I'm just going to keep rambling until I stop, which is probably going to make this turn into like a 2-hour episode. Like, I look at my book collection, the access that I have to books, to people that have passed away, but they've left their knowledge and their experience in writing, to people that are still here and sharing their journey as they live their lives and not waiting until they pass away before they publish a huge thesis or a huge book. I think that's incredible. Several hundred years ago, the only way to print a book, particularly before the Gutenberg press, was scholars, and there were very few and far between who could actually read and write, they were known as scribes because they would literally just rewrite the text in a book or in a scroll, depending how far back in time you go, but only if they were able to read and write. So we're talking about monks, we're talking about people of notoriety, but even then, not all of them could read and write. Whereas now, if someone wants to write something, most of us are literate. We learn how to read and write, and translation is not an issue. And now with technology, I can have AI summarize a book for me before I even read it. So give me the rundown on this book. Is it worth my time reading before I even dig into it? That's wild. So the fact that I've got access to, like, I see all these books and I see people. I see these individuals that I get to have personal conversations with as I read their content. Some of them I align with and I agree with. Some of them I don't necessarily agree with so much, but I still learn something. That's incredible. So I walk into my office and I feel a sense of gratitude that I'm surrounded by all these brilliant people who can help me. This isn't just a set. These are books I've actually read. Like, this can go down a very deep rabbit hole. I think about all the technology that I've currently got that has batteries in it. When I was a kid, batteries ran out of juice very quickly. And it felt like battery tech, like the technology of batteries themselves, was so far away from being useful in a way where they would hold charge for a long time. Now, we've got hours, days worth of batteries in our technology. Like, think about how much batteries are actually fueling various aspects of your life. It's wild. So if you're trying to create something for yourself, whatever it is, a career opportunity, a relationship, connection with your family that you didn't have, wealth, financial wealth, if you're trying to create and establish like a personal brand or build out your business, start with what you've got and appreciate what you've got. I can't emphasize that enough. Come back to gratitude for what you've got. It switches your energy state. It wakes something up in you. And I believe it kind of makes you like an attractive magnet. You know, magnets can repel on one pole and they can attract on the other pole. If you're trying to draw things into your life, you want to become magnetic in the sense that you're drawing and attracting in. So gratitude tends to be contagious, and I think people are drawn to others who are genuinely grateful, and we tend to feel repelled by people who are resentful and unappreciative of what they've got. So what if you started using that as a daily practice? Just come back to a couple of things. What are you grateful for? Something small. What do I have now that I'm grateful for? And build that list over the course of a week. Just write it down on a notepad or in a notebook if you need to. Type it out in Notion or whatever note-taking doc you've got. And just bullet points, just brain dump. Oh, I'm actually grateful for this. And it's personal to you. There's no right or wrong. It's just something you're grateful for. If you're grateful for your oven, amazing. Pick that. There's no right or wrong. So just start dumping this stuff out and coming back to it a couple of times a day, adding more stuff that you think of. Then tomorrow, and then the day after, and then the day after. And then at the end of 7 days, go back and reread that list. And it'll be hard to not feel a sense of gratitude. And that, I find, is a really powerful place to create from. So stop trying to push a boulder uphill and make your life really difficult by creating out of nothing, trying to manifest something that you don't have. And instead, manifest what you've already got. Look at the very things that you've created, that you've managed to draw into your life, and tap into a sense of appreciation for those things. And then only from there can you create, because you're tapping into a sense of abundance that already exists in your life, rather than assuming you don't have the thing you want and you want it, which is a state of scarcity. I know I've waxed on about this for quite a bit of time, but I actually can't overemphasize this as a process. So if this is all you do differently this week, please give it a go. You'll be surprised by what changes and the ripple effect it has. And then if you're someone who likes to make commitments to yourself, try it for 3 months and then report back to yourself at the end of 3 months. What is different? What's changed from the day before you started it to 3 months in? You'll be surprised by what you discover. All right, that's it from me. I hope that was helpful. I'll see you in the next one.